Carl Banks, man, the one and only Carl Banks. He's a former NFL player, won a couple Super Bowls with the Giants, 1986 and 1990. One of the great players to play for Giants. Yes, he played with the Redskins and the Browns, but he's always a Giant, man. At the highest order, did his thing, and he currently does, radio with Bob Papa on WFAN. Um, Also does, play-by-play with him as an analyst with him on NBC with the preseason games for the Giants, and he joins me live via Zoom. Welcome to the Rashad with the show, Carl Banks.
Hey Rashad, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for
I'm
coming on.
good. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. First question, man. Where are you originally from? Or where were you born?
Flint, Michigan. Um, Grew up Flint, born in Chicago, raised in Flint, Michigan.
Okay. Growing up, man, who were your role models? Who were the people that influenced you to play football?
I'm not sure I had any football influences in my family um, in terms of football, but my role models were, both my parents. Uh, I had some really great cousins, and then my cousin Larry Banks was a big influence on me as well.
Okay. Other than football, were there any other sports that you played? Other than football, was football your main sport that you played while you was in high school?
No, I was an all-state basketball player in high school, all-state track shot putter. But my first love has always been basketball. Um, I, I thought I'd be a pretty good basketball player at the next level. We were, know anything about Flint, Michigan, we put out some pretty good basketball players, and I, uh, I went and got a chance to meet Magic Johnson at a basketball camp my sophomore year in high school, and we remained friends over the years. But what you soon realize is that at 6'4", you're no longer considered a power forward, or 6'5", you're considered a point guard. And I was not, I did not have point guard skill set because of Magic Johnson. He changed all that for everybody. So football was my sport.
Okay. Other than Michigan State, were there any other schools that you wanted to go to, like other schools that was reaching out to you for scholarships to go to, other colleges other than
I was
Michigan State?
recruited. I was recruited by all the Big Ten schools, all the Big 12 schools, including Oklahoma with Barry Switzer and Billy Sims. I had Ohio State, Michigan, you name it, and then um, I had a few HBCUs that I visited one HBCU, almost went to another one just to visit. Um, but I think because of my relationship with Magic Johnson, Michigan State was going to be my choice. Um, and the interesting thing about Michigan State at the time, they weren't very good. They were just coming off of probation. And Magic, he assured me it would be the best choice I could ever make in terms of campus life, uh, and just being loved as an athlete. And he was right.
Okay. So you get drafted by the Giants, third round, third overall pick, 84. Um, Talk about that experience as being like, other than the Giants, like what the other teams that you was considering to play for. Obviously, you had no choice of who drafts you, but at that time, were there other teams other than Giants that you wanted to play for that you wish you would have played for other than the Giants?
No, I think for me, I didn't even. First of all, I didn't know I was going to be selected third overall. Um, and the Giants were never on my radar screen. They never even indicated that they were interested in any pre-draft stuff. And I think it's important also to remember or to note that after my last game at Michigan State, I wasn't invited to the combine. I didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl. So my expectation was that I'd be good enough to play in the pros. At that time there was no internet, I was a beast in the Big Ten. I knew I was good enough to play with anybody. Um, I was all Big Ten first team 3 years in a row. Um, I did make All-American, Bob Hope All-American squad, but I didn't get invited to the Combine. I didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl. So my coach, George Perlis, said that there's a bowl game where you'll get a lot of exposure to pro coaches. That's not the Senior Bowl. And he said, I guarantee you, if you go to this bowl game and you do what I expect you will do, by the time you get home, you'll be invited to everything. And it was the blue-gray game. It was played on Christmas Day in Birmingham, Alabama. And I believe, I know I played in it, but I believe I was MVP of that game, not just defense. And sure enough, when I got back home, I had a invitation to the NFL Combine and all the other glamorous bowl games like the Senior Bowl and the East-West game and the Hula Bowl out in Hawaii. So you fast forward post-Combine, and it's on draft day. At that time, I don't even think they were bringing players to New York. But even if they were, they probably wouldn't have invited me. And the phone rings, and it's Bill Parcells on the other end. I'm sitting watching the draft in my coach's office. And Bill calls me and tells me he selected me with the third pick in the draft, and he didn't draft me to sit me on the bench. And then at that point, I think at that point I realized, okay, well, they got 4 all-pro linebackers already on the team. This is going to be interesting.
Okay, yeah, because that's the thing, because they had Lawrence Taylor, obviously, Harry Carson, guys like that. So, yeah, talk about this, the experience, being able to try to find a way to get on that team and make, to be, be a starter, whatever it is, to try to, make your mark as a linebacker. Talk about that experience, because you're dealing with some great players like this, Carson and Taylor. Talk about that experience, blending in with those guys.
Yeah, so the one thing I didn't try to do is blend in. Okay. But the irony of you saying Carson and Taylor, those were the first 2 people I met when I entered the building. Neither guy seemed to be pretty that happy that I was there, number one. But I remember the famous words of Harry Carson. He just looked at me and said, "Homeboy, what are you going to do to get on the field?" Basically saying his squad was set. But I didn't lack confidence. I knew I was pretty good. But watching LT practice was something that was just mind-boggling. He practiced faster than I ever played a game in college football. But I knew that I would find I'd find my spot and I'd get the respect of those guys. I just had to just go out and do what I knew I could do. So I didn't try to overly impress or to befriend anyone. I just thought, and I still to this day think respect is earned, not given. And I think that the status of those players warranted being proved. You got to prove to those guys that you belong, because they lost 2 good teammates. Brad Van Pelt, who I grew up watching as a kid because our neighborhoods were next to each other and our schools played each other all the time, but he was like, excuse me, Brad Van Pelt was like the guy who could do everything. He was like Jim Thorpe because he played basketball, football, baseball. He ran track. He was really good. And so I kind of followed him all the way through, not by choice, but, in high school, he went to Michigan State. I ended up following him. Um, and then when I got out of college, it was with the Giants, and he was pretty good. So I think what guys like Lawrence and Harry, because they have such a high bar that you just have to prove to them that you're worthy. And for me, it was that was the easy part. Just going in, do what I do, not trying to live up to anyone else's expectations, because my expectations were already high, probably higher than what they thought of me. In terms of, even if I was good enough, I expected to be dominant. So I just went about my business.
Okay, that '84 season, it was like the beginning of the resurgence of the Giants because as tough times, made to the playoffs in '91. But '84, that playoff game against the Rams, talk about that, having to stop, Eric Dickerson. Talk about that. You guys won that game to advance to the second round. Talk about that game. Wow.
Yeah, so the great Eric Dickerson, he was running over the entire NFL, and I mean, it was just incredible. But I believe heading into that game, that Wednesday morning, Bill Parcells said, "I got $1,000 for the first player to put Eric Dickerson on his ass." Right? He wanted to set the tone. So you can go back and watch the first series of the game and find out who that was who put Eric Dickerson on his ass. And it was, and we wanted to set the tone for our defense, and we won the game.
Okay, so you win that game, in that wild card game, 16-13. Now you go face a team in the 49ers that will become your rival, years to come. That great, 49 team, very underrated great team. They 15-1. Lose to them, unfortunately, 21-10. Talk about that matchup and just having to deal with that West Coast offense and trying to shut those guys down. Unfortunately, lost that game. But just talk about that game, particularly going against the 49ers.
At that time, we had one style of play, right? And for the most part, we tried to impose our will on everybody. The 49ers had their own style, and they looked finesse on paper or even on film, but up close and personal, they were just as physical, just as tough. They executed a little differently. So playing against Joe Montana, that was the team you loved to hate, man, because they were so good, yet so polished, and yet they were the anti-NFL style. They didn't play rough and tumble, even though to a man they were as physical, as aggressive, but they just made it look so much different. And so we lose that game. It was our education on the road to success. We knew that, and like you said, for years to come, they would be a rival outside of our division, because when you look at the 1980s, there were three teams that pretty much owned it in terms of Super Bowls. It was San Francisco, Washington, and New York. We owned the 80s. And so you knew that if you were going to get to a Super Bowl, it was going to be somehow that NFC Championship game, you knew you were going to see the 49ers.
Okay, so 85 rolls around, beat San Francisco 49ers this time, 17-3, original loss from last year. Talk about shutting down that offense, man. The holding 3 points, man. Talk about that game at Giants Stadium.
Yeah, so we were able to force the 49ers to play our style of football. We understood what they like to do. We understood what bothered them in terms of their execution. And so what we did is, we had great coaches, just like they did, but, we had the mad genius, Bill Belichick, who kind of devised a game plan where we knew how we could take the timing and rhythm of their offense away, and then our offense just became more physical, and we had to, playing in Giant Stadium, we knew they were not going to be able to throw the ball as well. So we wanted to focus on their run game, but we also, we wanted to limit what they could do passing. But our offense, we focused on heavy run packages, and Phil was a master at knowing what the conditions were at what end of the field and at what time of the day in the old Giant Stadium. So he knew when he could pass the ball, and he knew when we could run it. And if you didn't practice, and see, we practiced in that stadium every single day. So Phil knew the when, our kickers knew the when, our punters knew the when. They would go out and just throw just to see what throws were available, um, when they would be available. If it's a 4:00 game and the wind's going to do certain things, they knew all of this stuff. So um, our offense, we were in tune, but we went heavy run packages through when we had to throw, and it was a pretty good victory for us.
Yeah, Joe Morris ran for 141 yards, ran the ball extremely well. And now the next game against the Bears, obviously, they considered made the greatest team ever, 85 Bears, 21 nothing. Fortunately, things didn't work out with them. They obviously were a great team. Second year playing another great team. We lost another great team the previous year. Talk about that matchup against the Bears.
Again, it was just another part of the process to get where we needed to go. I think defensively, we were all being compared to their group, and they were a damn good group. And so we leave that game because we just basically got it handed to us. We leave that game and we knew that there was another level we had to go to in terms of being a dominant team and a dominant defense. And so immediately after that game, before we got back on the plane, we knew that we were going to the Super Bowl and winning it in 1986. And the thing about that Chicago game that sticks out most, I mean, we didn't perform well. Wind so strong, it blew the ball off from the punter to his foot. The gust of wind blows the football. And I talked about Giant Stadium, and then that lake effect snow off of Lake Michigan in Chicago was just as tough. They understood the conditions, and we didn't. But I mean, again, part of the process.
Okay, so now the 86 year, you dominant. You win 14 games, go 14-2. 8 Pro Bowlers: Navarro, Benson, Burke, Carson, Landetta, Marshall, Morrison, obviously LT. Dominate. Talk about the 49ers again. You play them again. This time you smash them 49-3. That's the game where Jim Burke knocked Joe Montana out.
Yep.
LT made the interception, ran it back for a touchdown. Talk about that dominant win against 49ers, 49-3.
Well, that was a game where, again, we were just not going to be denied that entire season. And if I'm correct, if you look that up, I think we knocked out 8 or 9 quarterbacks. Didn't finish the game against us that year. So we were out for business, man. And it was one of those deals where we were going to impose our will defensively, and you were going to know that we were one of the most dominant football teams in the history of football.
Okay, 17-0. The Redskins, division rival, obviously beat them 17-0. Very windy game. Beat them 17-zip. Talk about this finally, getting to that process to get to Super Bowl on a mission, beating them 17-0.
Again, like it's pretty much, you got the Redskins. They're your rival. You play them twice a year. We beat them twice. We had to come back and beat them again to get to the Super Bowl, and we did it. That was our goal. teams that pretty much owned the 80 Super Bowls. It was Washington, New York, and San Francisco. So, we knew this was part of that heavyweight slugfest, man, that we had to endure in order to get the prize.
Okay, now Super Bowl 21, Pasadena, California, the Rose Bowl. You win your first Super Bowl 39-20. You had made a great goal on stand against that offense led by John Elway. Made a key tackle on that goal line. It was a game changer. Talk about that win. Finally, win the championship for the first time in a long time because the Giants hadn't won in years. Was winning the championship. Talk about that victory over the Broncos, 39-20.
So going into that game, again, mindset, job's not complete until you walk off the field with that trophy. And so it was basically whatever it took. We went to Pasadena, and I mean, it was a fun trip. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed California, but we were really all about business. And I remember spending so much time studying the Denver Broncos that I pretty much kind of understood the rhythm of how they played. And you talk about that goal line stand, but that was just a play somebody was expected to make. We had made two other great plays, and we needed another stop to force a field goal. I basically said, I'm going to make this play, and I made the play. But that was kind of how that game went for me. I think maybe out of the first 8 or 9 plays of the game, I might have made 7. It was I was pretty locked in that game, and I think if Phil Simms hadn't got the MVP, if he hadn't had a near perfect game, I probably would have been the MVP of that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you made a lot of big tackles in that game. Yeah. Definitely. So you were Super Bowl champion now. 8-7 season rolls around. Strange season, the strike year. Unfortunately, finished 5th in the NFC East. Go 6-9. Let's talk about that season. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going with the strike. You wasn't able to get to the playoffs, but let's talk about that strange year, 87. That
hard. It's hard. I mean, it broke a lot of the momentum that we had. And then, the thing about football at that time, rosters didn't turn over with free agency. That's part of why we were out on strike, to try to get a little more player movement. But as a team, and I think, in hindsight, our ownership at the time will tell you they mismanaged that completely, because they fielded really bad players and they just could not compete. So by the time we got back, we were kind of behind the 8 ball, if you will, in terms of trying to defend our championship. So it was the strike in and of itself, I think, was very necessary for the progress of the league that we see today, in terms of how it disrupted our opportunity to go back to a Super Bowl. It did, but that's life, Some teams manage that the replacement players better than others, and our management just basically didn't care, and that's why we were not able to defend that championship.
Okay, so fast forward to 88 season, win 10 games. The game that stands out to me was the Jet game because Al Toon scores a touchdown in the back of the end zone that, unfortunately, not your team out the playoffs, and the Eagles able to win that division, losing the conference was tiebreak to the Rams for the final wild card. So talk about that tough loss because you had a chance to win it. And also that was the final year for Jordan Martin and Harry Carson. Talk about that season.
Yeah, so 88 was another year. And I can, so we can go chronologically for my career and I could sum up each year, but 88 was a year that we thought we would bounce back and get back on track. But the process begins over each and every year. And then the following year in 1989 was another year we thought we would go to the Super Bowl and win it. We were just that good. Our 1989 team was better than the team that won the Super Bowl in 1990. Obviously, we know the story with Flipper Anderson there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right. So, and there's a lot more to, Flipper Anderson, and the tail grows the longer the years go by. But Mark Collins had a broken ankle. He was trying to gut it out. Credit their team for going at him, and they got the play they wanted. Simple as that. But we were used to the process because we had to get there the same way from 84 to 86, right? So 89 was the team, again, that we thought we would be in the Super Bowl. 1990 comes, we're back in the Super Bowl, we win it, we beat the most prolific offense in football. The Buffalo Bills in the K-Gun offense. And, that was quite a feat because we have a defensive game plan that's in the Hall of Fame right now. We deployed 2 defensive linemen, and everything else was defensive backs and linebackers. And the reason we had to do that is because their offense was so fast that if you had to just line up at the line of scrimmage and try to drop into coverage, the ball was out of the quarterback's hand and he was off and running. And I think they scored 50 points in the AFC Championship game. It was either 50 or 40 points against the
51.
Yeah, against the Raiders, and it wasn't even close. But the offense was so fast that if you were, part of the scouting apparatus that has to exchange game film, you missed part of their game because they would line up and be gone. So what Bill Belichick had to do was to take footage of a network, because they take every angle, and splice it into the scouting film so that we could get the full picture of what they were doing. And then offensively, and this is why Bill Parcells is such an incredible strategist. He knew that offensively they could help our defense, but also help our offensive line at the same time, meaning we had to run the ball, run the clock out, and keep the pressure off of Jeff Hostetler, who was our backup quarterback at the time, because Phil had gotten hurt. We had a season plagued with injuries. In 90, I had broken a wrist, or dislocated my wrist. Phil Simms was out, Joe Morris was out. We had to go to Otis Anderson, who was like ever ready. He was always ready and understood the task at hand. And so we put together a great game plan. By the time Buffalo knew what we were doing defensively, it was too late. We had, we let Thurman Thomas get his 100 yards, which was something when we were told that's what had to happen, strategically, we just couldn't understand it because we just weren't used to conceding yardage. And the reason Bill Belichick said this, because they had stopped traditionally running the football like after game 8 of the season, and their run game was a draw play and a swing pass. So they didn't have a run game. So he knew the biggest threat to our defense was them passing the football. So they passed the football. We were punishing receivers. Thurman ended up getting 100 yards, but it was too little, too late. And I think the unsung hero of that game, is great of a game as Otis Sanderson had in our offensive line, our defense as a unit. The unsung hero of that game is our punter, Sean Landetta. That last series, the last series of the game, if he doesn't force a fair catch at the 9-yard line and they get the ball at the 20, it's game over. It's them. They win that football game. Because that kicker would have made the field goal if everything went the same, with the exception of a touchback or a return of any sort. The game probably turned out different. And I could, coming down to the last few minutes of the game, you kind of got the sense that you got two guys, two heavyweights slugging it out. And, when they lined up for that field goal, you were trying to figure out what you were going to feel if it went through, right? And, you can have all the self-confidence in the world and say, well, we did enough to win this game, we deserve it. And on the other side, I'm sure they were saying they did enough to win the game, they deserve it too. And their kicker just didn't execute. But you would walk away from that game and you say, damn, this was one hell of a game, win, lose, or draw. And if that kick goes in, you basically have to tip your hat to them. But we just thought we executed every detail of what we were supposed to do, including special teams. Special teams are very important. Then after that, the team started to break up. We got a little bit of the free agency situation, coaching change, Ray Henley, which was, probably the worst decision the team could have made in terms of hiring head coaches. I mean, they've had some bad coaches recently, and they still don't equal that of Ray Henley. There's a saying I have: if it ain't broke, don't break it. Well, Ray Henley broke it. It wasn't broke. He had basically a returning Super Bowl team, and he brought in bad defensive coordinator. He wanted to do things his way. It was just not good. And that following year, Dan Reeves came in. He wanted his own people, so I was let go. I signed a contract with Washington. They offered me a lot of money. Washington was probably the most unique experience I ever had because, being on the winning side of a rivalry, you just don't know how personal they take it. And so when I got to Washington, I didn't have any friends. I had two. Kurt Govea, Monty Coleman was really good to me, and Mark Collins. So it's three guys. Other than that, I fought once a week in practice, at least once a week in practice. And so I was never embraced as a teammate. I knew I wasn't going to be there long anyway, and I ended up reunited with Bill Belichick. We went on to do some record-setting things in Cleveland one year. We built, they were close. They had Pepper there the year before I arrived and I got there. And we ended up having some good years there. They put together a great roster. Ozzie Newsome, his success speaks for itself. One of the best personnel men this league has ever seen. I'm glad he's finally getting the credit for it. And so that's a career. And then after that, I entered the broadcasting world full time. I entered the fashion world full time. I developed my NFL and NBA and NHL and Major League Baseball and college collections while I was still playing. I started off just doing big and tall clothes, and then ended up being, a full service fashion entrepreneur in all the major sports leagues, and so I was able to dedicate a lot of attention to that, and so that's where we are. In addition to a lot of other entrepreneurial endeavors that I'm involved in now that you'll hear more about soon.
Yeah, with the broadcasting career, what made you want to get into doing broadcast? Because you was a sideline reporter first. Because I listened to a lot of the Giants games. Dick Lynch, Dave Jennings, and Bob Papa. I remember you was a
Yeah,
sideline reporter. Then you made your move up to the booth. But what made you want to get into broadcasting in general?
my degree from Michigan State was in communications, and I thought I'd be working in advertising or something like that, but I've always admired the Gumble brothers, Brian and Greg, and Brian was very nice to me. Early on, I looked up to him, and there are a few other people in the business, um, and it just made me want to do it. I understood the game. I knew how to talk the game in a language that people could understand. Um, so when I was playing, this is something that you see more common today than you did when I played. But I used to do a pregame report during the week, a scouting report, and then I do a post-game show. I go up to the booth to do an hour after a game to talk on the post-game show. Now, it's not uncommon now to see that, but at that time, it wasn't. So I was laying the groundwork for it, and to be able to be on the team with Bob, Dick, and Dave Jennings was awesome to me. So I mean, to be there as a sideline reporter um, was my point of entry, and with the unfortunate passing of Dave Jennings, who was very instrumental in number one how I looked at football as a player because he was a teammate, right? He was our punter for years prior to Sean Landetta. But some of the conversations you would have with Dave Jennings and his knowledge about the game and how you should look at it strategically was unparalleled. And so having that, and then having basically I sat at the knee of him basically being on the sidelines, listening to him as he broadcast games with Dick Lynch and Bob Papa. You got a chance to listen to that, and I knew uh, my style was different, but just having a formative effect on how you articulate the game to someone who can't see it was invaluable. So, and I think that's why Bob and I are the best in this business amongst team broadcasters. And so I've always wanted to do it. I was going to be involved in it some kind of way, and the opportunity presented itself, unfortunately, but fortunately. When Dave got sick, I was able to join Dick and Bob, and obviously Dick passed away shortly thereafter. And it's just now me and Bob.
Yeah, and also you do the games on NBC, the preseason games with the Giants. Also, I check that out. Also, I check out the post game with your analysis. That's why it's so great to have you on because I listen to you a lot. You and Bob all the time, the post game and everything. Also the MSG stuff with First and 10 and all that other stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the Giants of today. Obviously, they're falling on hard times. They used to have the drafted Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal, the
Mm-hmm.
offensive tackle. Give your evaluation of the Giants draft picks and what you think of these two gentlemen, what it brings to the Giants.
Um, well, I can't evaluate them as pros because they haven't played a pro game yet.
Yeah,
What I can tell you though is that neither guy would be considered a reach. They were drafted at the areas where they were projected amongst all college football players that play their position. So if you watch Kayvon Thibodeau when he was at Oregon, complete dominant football player, but then you pair that with a kid who he's bright, he's curious, but he gets what makes one successful in the league. He understands the important moments of the game. So I think the Giants selected a kid who's gonna. I think he's gonna rise to superstardom. Evan Neal, he's gonna be the other side of an offensive line that I think is going to be really good. I think Andrew Thomas is a player that showed that he's got it figured out. Now Evan Neal comes in, and I think they were teammates too. Big guy, ranked very high. You could tell why the Giants selected him over some of the other guys. Was his versatility, and so they're gonna, those two players are where they, in terms of where they were evaluated. No one will say that the Giants reached on any of them. But the Giants draft didn't end in the first round. A lot of fans look at that and then they think, okay, you judge a draft on what they did in their first round. But it's also what they did in rounds 2 and 3 and then even undrafted free agents. So positions that needed to be addressed, they started to address later on in the draft. Wan'Dale Robinson, everybody scratched their head and they were like, why did they select a guy like that? And because they had never heard of him. Because in the SEC, all they thought existed was Alabama receivers because they dominated the draft the last few years. But then you go and you look, who was the top-rated receiver in the SEC last year? Wan'Dale Robinson.
Wow.
100 and some catches. He was the most productive receiver above the Alabama guys. So the Giants knew what they were getting there. They also knew the type of player that they wanted to get for their offense because they have a certain type of offense. So they got a tight end, which is an area of need. They lost Evan Ingram. So they started to add some pieces. We won't know beyond the big three what the rest is or how we rank them until they take the field and play football. But we know the 3 guys that they selected top 3, they got right just based on projection, talent, and need. So they got that right, and we'll see when they put the pads on.
Yeah, one last question on the coaching aspect. Never mind. I'm gonna have to stop the interview right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, thank you for your time, man. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for coming on. I'm a big fan of you and Bob Papa. Big fan of the Giants, man. I'm happy to have a guy that I grew up watching as a kid, man, growing up, and keep doing your thing, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's Carl Banks, linebacker of the New York Giants, the Redskins, and the Browns.